What's going on, everybody? This is Professor Crypto Banana, and today's episode, oh my goodness, I got Doublesharp here, goes by the name of Justin in real life. He's a big developer on the Fantom blockchain. You've probably seen him from Fantom Unchained, and if you're curious about what kind of innovation is happening on Fantom, you want to know a little bit more about FNFTs and just like more about developing in general, today's video is just for you. So before I get started, let's give the intro to the audience as to Justin, who you are.
Hi, everybody. My name is Justin, and I go by Doublesharp on various chat programs. I have been doing IT for a long time now. I've been interested in computers since I was a kid, and so I've been doing consulting and working for startups since the dot-com boom and bust and reboom and crypto taking off. And so I have been sort of connected to a lot of crypto projects for a while, just through my network of people that I knew, and decided to work more on smart contract development and specifically on Fantom last spring. And so since then, I've been doing a lot of development and sort of poking around on Fantom, the network, and the various projects, and meeting people and seeing where I could be helpful and what I can work on. And so I've been lucky enough to work on some fun NFT projects and help do research on pushing smart contracts forward a little bit, and helping with security, and helping to find and prevent exploits and all sorts of crazy crypto stuff.
So why Fantom? Like, what out of all the blockchains, what brought you over to Fantom, and also why are you staying on Fantom?
I've had experience on other chains before, and if honestly, part of as a web developer, application developer, I saw potential for a lot of crypto applications and decentralized applications, but the UX was terrible. Like it was just a clunky system for a really long time. And so when I took another look last spring, I felt like there were new protocols or in networks, chains that had come out that actually made things workable and usable in real life. And that's where I thought I could provide more value, is taking my knowledge of application development and then integrating that with crypto to make something that's actually usable. And when I was looking at different chains, and it was, obviously different last spring than it is now, but it still largely holds true, that Fantom was cheap and fast to use. The 1 second finality, like those things made it attractive to me to develop on, because you can make a real interactive application that's enjoyable to use.
What is unique is, as you mentioned, you're more of like a consultant, right? Because a lot of people, they're like tied to a certain project. It's like, okay, this is individual A that is known from this project, but you're just like, hey, very advanced dev, you help out where is needed, etc., and like a familiar face.
I wanted to gain knowledge about the space and how different protocols work and how different projects are operating, and I just like to meet people and find out the cool stuff that's going on, so that you can sort of bring ideas between different projects. And so I did just sort of poke my way in, and it wasn't even necessarily on a consulting basis. I would just send people a lot of messages until they responded to me, and then I would chat with them about what they were doing and offer to help for free so that I could get in their good graces or something. But it was partially because I was learning from them, so I was seeing if I could be helpful for some of their projects. And that is actually something else that I think is unique about Fantom, that it gets talked about some, and I think the foundation puts out tweets about it and stuff, but there are a lot more, like, developers on Fantom can largely get in touch with each other whenever is needed, or just like there's something that needs to happen on the chain that, like, it'll be more efficient if the protocols all do this. And so everyone's able to like message each other and get those things implemented. People do largely have like open lines of communication, and it's not like sort of walled off, whereas it's kind of hard to get in touch with people on other chains and like let people know of a problem or just an improvement or share some code or whatever. So that's something that happens on Fantom more, which is also nice.
Yeah, because I just did a video yesterday talking about how I see there's a lot of synergy between a lot of the Fantom projects. For example, like Liquid Driver has a partnership with Deus, but then there's also Reaper Farms, so then you can auto compound there. And each project really knows each other and they're working together to progress. And I haven't really seen that on other chains. Is that just my assumption?
I mean, I think that's true. And I think, I mean, to some extent, you have to credit Austin and FTM Alerts. I think I didn't actually realize how early I was as a developer on Fantom. And I did sort of get like pulled into FTM Alerts and put into some of these like developer only channels with other project devs because of like some of the background that I had. And I have worked on projects on Fantom. And then, you know, I think because of that, there are a lot of, it's just people have sort of known each other, known of each other for a while. So there is more opportunities of being like, hey, can you help with this? Or do you want to work together on this? This is something that could be beneficial to multiple projects, which is not to say that there's not competition on Fantom between protocols who are in the same space, or, you know, some people don't like each other for personal reasons, I'm sure, but like on the whole, like people work together pretty well and are generally collaborative. And I do think people look at it as like a team effort of like, if we all work together, we're more likely to be successful. We all are going to, if Fantom is successful, we're all going to be successful. So like, it's in our interest to make sure that we're competing with each other, but not at the expense of like tearing people down. It's more just like healthy competition, I think.
So you mentioned Avalanche, right? And I see a lot of people mention on Twitter, like, oh, the subnets. And I'll be honest, I don't really know much about the technology and the architecture that revolves around, let's say, Avalanche. Can you explain a little bit more about that and how that differs from Fantom? I hear things get thrown out, such as the FVM, like the Fantom virtual machine, and how that's going to help on gas and be a game changer. But can you just like explain the differences, how Fantom is a little bit special, but also at a 5-year-old level?
Sure. So on Avalanche, the subnets are basically a built-in layer 2 where you can control how the subnet is configured, how you want the validators to work. But then it's still tied into the main net for Avalanche. And it was a compelling design when I was looking at, you know, last spring, like looking at which chain I wanted to develop on. A big thing of what that lets you do is if you have, and this will go into the EVM, FVM stuff in a second, but you're limited by something in terms of how many transactions per second you can process. And so when you hear chains talk about 1 million per second or 10,000 or whatever, they're usually talking about value transfers of the base currency, not a smart contract transaction. And so smart contract transactions go through the EVM, which is the Ethereum virtual machine. And a virtual machine is what it sounds like. It's a program that acts like a computer. And so the Ethereum virtual machine isn't very fast. And because of that, like it limits the amount of transactions per second that you can actually process through it. And the same thing is true on any EVM chain. Like you're largely limited by the performance of the EVM and not the performance of the underlying consensus. So what Avalanche's approach is, and what to some extent like Polygon and L2s are like, well, if we run a faster or multiple subnets that are L2s, like we can have other virtual machines that are processing things, and it's a way to sort of run things in parallel and then like pull it back when you need to. So it's sort of like running another chain that like not that many people trust is like one way of looking at it. So it's not a huge decentralized network, but like you're tying it back through into the main net through a bridge that you can trust the value on the main net. So Avalanche, if you want to scale, you can launch your own subnet to be able to process all your transactions on your own chain and then only bridge them back to the main net when you want. On Fantom, it's a bit different of an approach where they're working on actually just improving the throughput of the EVM, which is they're calling the FVM, the Fantom virtual machine. And Michael Kong and Dr. Schultz Professor Schultz that they've hired to work on some of this VM performance what they're looking at is actually working on the middleware and how the like syncing in a decentralized way, and like making sure that you can actually keep the consensus in sync, and just improving the actual throughput of the virtual machine so that you don't have to deal with bridging to a subnet to get faster performance. So if you just make the EVM faster by fixing things and improving the data access and improving the storage, and I'm sure there's a number of things that they can look at to improve. And so if you end up getting the performance there, you don't have to go through the whole process of bridging to a subnet, which long way around is ultimately why I did sort of pick Fantom, because even though I do like the design and it is a scalability solution for the moment on Avalanche, it's a little bit funky to use to have to like go to a subnet, because you are on somewhat of a different network. And I was, sort of just put faith in the Fantom Foundation development that they were actually going to be able to push some of this stuff forward, and that I would prefer to develop on an L1 that has this fast finality, that if they're going to improve the EVM throughput on, like, that's what I'm looking for.
So I may be incorrect about this, but this is how I'm understanding it. So I think of it now as like Avalanche has multiple layers beneath it, like multiple L2s, kind of to like delegate and give out the extra work and then like try to come back. But there's still a bottleneck of speed. And your thought process was, well, really the bottleneck, the main source of the congestion is the EVM itself. And that is what they're looking to speed up. So if you think about, like, let's say going on a highway and there was like a traffic accident up at front, it doesn't matter how many lanes you have open, like that main congestion point. So as long as they can correct different ways on how to make that happen by bringing in different people to say, like, how can we make this work? Boom, ready to go. And that is the solution that you were focused on.
Yeah. And I think another sort of thing that I've been saying recently is that people do refer to the FVM, and there isn't really there's no like release of the FVM that's going to come out. It's going to be changes to the virtual machine that runs on Fantom over time that you'll see improvements from. Some of it will be a bigger improvement than others. Some of it may be incremental improvements. Some improvements might not actually improve performance and just set things up for future performance improvements. But really, it just means that you're customizing the VM for Fantom to perform in the network conditions that Fantom has and optimized for that are not the same as what you see on Ethereum, which it was designed for. And so a lot of chains aren't necessarily doing that. And I think it does make for, it's interesting to think about the kind of applications you can build if they are able to do that. And I do also think it's ambitious, but I also think that there's like achievable goals that they're setting. And like Michael Kong has said on interviews, like they've identified things that they know that they know are problems and are bottlenecks, and they have solutions for them, and they're testing and implementing them. So it's not like it would be amazing if we could do this and we have no idea how. It's like, oh, we want to do this, and like here's some ideas we have, and here's what we're doing. And it's not, this stuff takes time, and you want to make sure you get it right. But it's not like it. I think in the short version of it is that it's a better user experience to keep people on an L1 from an application developer perspective, and being able to do that and still increase throughput I see that being advantageous. And that's why people are always asking, when is the FVM coming out? Because I think a lot of people think that.
Right. So this is going to be my last question about the FVM, because naturally I need to watch that interview and get caught up here. But the FVM, I'm naturally thinking, okay, it's making everything on the Fantom side a lot faster, configuring it, etc. Are these changes and solutions something that can be used on different chains, or is this specific on Fantom just to make tweaks, make it better? And it's also backwards compatible in the sense that it works with Ethereum code, kind of enhances it.
I mean, I'm not working on it, so I don't know for sure. I have seen some tweets from people, I'm saying people because I actually don't remember who. Like some of the stuff, like you don't necessarily want to say what it is because other projects could take it and just implement it. So it does sound like some of the stuff are just innovations that could be taken back to other chains. at the same time, there are unique things about Fantom that you can optimize for that wouldn't be applicable to other chains. So there's like a competitive advantage to not necessarily like letting everybody know what it is until you release it, because they will be able to implement something similar. And then there's also just things that are unique about Fantom. I mean, I've been able to do some interesting things with random numbers, not using oracles and things because of the short finality on Fantom. It means that you don't have to, like, it uses math to do it instead of using oracles to do it. So it takes advantage of the short block time finality on Fantom. So things like that, you could port it back to Ethereum, but it would work. It just wouldn't be as nice from a UX perspective because you have to wait a lot longer potentially for a transaction to go through.
So let me get this straight. So essentially, it's unique on the Fantom side. You're able to capitalize by doing a different way of generating random numbers, which to most people probably doesn't make a difference. But because you're doing it through a different approach, there's actually performance and other benefits to it.
Yeah. And I was sort of like mixing up two things. So I was more saying like as an aside, I've been able to implement things like provable random numbers in a way that works with UX that takes advantage of Fantom's block time finality. And I'm sure on the EVM side of things, there's similarly things that are unique about Fantom that you can take advantage of when implementing the FVM or improvements to the EVM that, these are just examples that are like random. I'm making it up, but like there could just be something that says like, oh, well, we need to wait for like this many blocks on Ethereum before we're like, okay with doing this other thing. Or like, we want to like run through this loop this many times because of whatever reason. And you look through the code and you're like, oh, we don't actually have to do that on Fantom because like, here's this other part of the consensus that's different from Ethereum. So we can like get rid of this like loop that waits for a little bit. And then it's just faster. And like that piece of code may be entirely necessary on Ethereum and maybe some other chains. It's just not necessary on Fantom because it has a different consensus protocol. And so that's when you start like those sort of things you wouldn't be able to just put into Ethereum or put out into other chains because they take advantage of, or it's like optimizing for that specific consensus. But then there's other optimizations like everything uses LevelDB, which is not like it's pretty old and stuff, and like just not necessarily the most optimized. There's an API compliant database called PebbleDB that's just faster, and so I think people are like I think it was Fantom is replacing the LevelDB with PebbleDB, which is just like improving the stack to make some of the stuff faster. So if the data access is faster, that's not a bottleneck anymore. Or if that part is a bottleneck, like you remove that, then you can focus on other pieces.
So when I hear DB, I'm assuming that means like database, and you were just saying stack. Does that mean that there's something that's happening where it's storing the information in a very local database and it's allowed to access it at a quicker rate?
Yeah, I mean that's when you hear that a validator node takes 3 terabytes of storage, it has a 3 terabyte database of all of the events and transactions that have ever happened on Fantom. Storing 34 million transactions and all the data and all the history of everything that's ever happened is big. And that's where the like snap sync and stuff like that comes in, because 3 terabytes sounds like a lot, and it is. But if you don't need that many archive nodes, if you have like indexers that are indexing the data so that other people can reference it, you don't necessarily need an archive node for everything. And so that's what SnapSync is lets you just sync up with the head of the chain. And so you don't have to worry about the whole history. It's still like legit. You can even be a validator and validate new transactions and know that they're all good to go, but you don't have to like sync the 3 terabytes of history. You just have to get takes a couple hours to get like the latest transactions and sync up with that part of the network and then go forward. But that's sort of, I mean, any large application that you think about has similar data storage behind it. Like you have your, spinning disk storage for your data that doesn't get accessed that much because it's really cheap. And then you have your like slow SSDs for data that gets accessed a little more frequently. And then you have like your fast stuff for things that are getting accessed all the time, and algorithms to move stuff around between different storage depending on how it's being used. And so similar sort of architecture that sounds like is being built for this, where you'll have some servers that have like this huge history of all the data, of all the transactions that have ever happened in their database, and then some that have like more recent transactions in their database. But it is literally a database of, storing all the different things that happened.
So like naturally when I hear about like 3 terabytes, I'm like, oh shoot, Fantom's been around for a little bit, a lot more transactions happening, right? People are like, oh my gosh, more transactions happen on Fantom than did on Ethereum. What's that going to do to the disk space that's required? And you're saying like based on like SnapSync and different enhancements, it's like, well, you're pretty much fine. Like, do you have to worry about the growing number of memory that's required for a validator?
No, because it's not like in by memory, if you mean like RAM, the actual, if you the volatile memory on your computer, it doesn't take that much RAM. It's a lot of it is just like the history of the chain right now. And so if you with SnapSync, most people care about recent data, and if you have worked with making RPC calls through code to servers, it's kind of like there's no way to like say, give me all the holders of this token necessarily. So when you go on FTM scan and it shows you all the holders of a token, it's because they've like maintained a history of monitoring all the events of all the transfers to keep track of who has what. So it's not like you're querying the RPC server for that stuff directly anyway. A lot of that stuff is just based on indexing blockchain data to be able to display it. So you still have all that same index data available, and then you don't need all of the RPC nodes to be archive nodes to have that available. So that is sort of how you scale over time, is like things like SnapSync or QuickSync or whatever, where you don't need to have the full blockchain synced on every node. And then some of them will be archive nodes, and people who want direct access to archive nodes might run their own and pay for it. And then there's shared infrastructure through Anchor, and I'm sure other companies will, or either are or will be offering. Actually, I know there's some other companies that are like RPC server access, so you don't have to like run your own to do that. And 3 terabytes is a lot of space, but I can allocate 3 terabytes of space very quickly by like clicking a few buttons, and it costs me not that much money these days. So like disk space is relatively cheap, and especially if you just over time you're not going to end up with like a million copies of it, because you don't need that.
All right, Justin. So I got here a diagram showing just, man, a flow chart, and it doesn't have yield staking. So I'm a little bit lost. Can you explain what's going on here?
Sure thing. Yeah, this is sort of the high level diagram of the liquid staking